Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Metroid Other M. In the last part we continued through Sector 1 doing the King Key Hunter boss fight, and now it's time for us to continue further through Sector 1. By and large, the sectors in this game are relatively large, which is weird because in a way if you look at their map, they seem like they're going to be very small areas, but between the combat encounters within, sometimes the minor puzzles they have, and of course the cutscenes, there's a surprising amount of meat in each one of these sectors, despite there being half as many as there were in Fusion. With that said, Fusion definitely had more out-of-the-way rooms you can go into for items. Like, we can head into this room right now to grab this missile tank, which you can grab later on as well, because you do come into this room later on in the story. But for right now, this is just out of the way. It is weird that most of the items in this game are just along the way. Like, barring one particular sector early on in the game, you can get, I'd say, at least 70% of the game's items, maybe, just by playing through the story and getting everything you can in a straight pathway. And it's one of the only Metroid games like that, really, at least out of the ones that count, that don't count, like, major equipment pickups as item percentages. It's real weird, but I do like it for the way it does it, I suppose, in some regard. Because with this game's action focus, if they had made it so you needed to backtrack over and over again for different items, it would feel real awkward. Because the Samus's mobility in this game, she controls well, at least for a game using only the sideways Wiimote. But this is not the Samus, and this is not the level design that you are in Super Metroid or Zero Mission. This is more or less a, well, because it's a Ninja Theory game, it's like you're in Ryu Hayabusa in a space station. For better or worse. Good to see the good old fish enemies, though. I don't know why. I've always liked these little skeleton fish. Ever since I first saw them in, would I have seen them? They were in Fusion. I would have seen them in Fusion. A red variant and blue variant of them were in Fusion. We need to run through this water, though, just to turn this switch on. Sometimes the sub-objectives for individual rooms is very clear. Sometimes it's you have to look around. I'm just glad there's not many cases in the game where you need to do a forced first-person segment just to look for an individual item like we have in the plot so far. If it's not a cutscene, you don't have to do that. And I'm thankful. There's also one of the rooms I think of whenever I play the game, whenever I think of the game, too. And I don't know why, because it's not very remarkable. Oh, also, Samus underwater controls like Samus underwater in the previous game. She's slow, sluggish, your jump doesn't go nearly... Ow! Damn! That was rude. I admittedly forgot to take care of the vine enemies along the way. Whoops. It is, admittedly, interesting, by the way, doing an LP like this for once, because for those who aren't around this channel often, the way I tend to do LPs nowadays is I record, if, say, it's a game with multiple levels, like, say, a Mega Man or a Mario or a Donkey Kong, I do each level as its own separate recording, so I can not only get a good take of that level, but I don't, say, have a computer error 3 stages into a 5-stage recording long section, 5-stage long recording session that just completely corrupts the file. I do one per one. Doing this with my capture card through OBS, A, results in longer video files than I'm used to working with, but also, from the editing side of things, there's less to do, yes, but I have to keep my eyes out for things more often, because there's just weird... It's a weird mental thing, I think is what it comes down to. I like it, but it is kind of odd. With that said, I should apologize. I even think of one, if it's not this video, it's next video. There are the occasional weird little capture card flashes where maybe the TV signal gets cut off for a second, or there's some weird wiring problem. Usually it's like maybe a frame or two long. If it's distracting, I'm sorry. That's just technical hiccups that I can't really do anything about, especially with my current room setup. Hearing the audio in this room reminds me, though, I brought up before that this game uses a full orchestra for its music. I think that was part 2's intro. They don't really use it for much. Most of the music, quote-unquote, in this game is just ambient sounds. There's only maybe the intro part of the entirety of the ending, really. The final boss, another boss fight outside of that, and another other boss fight. And certain cutscenes that play any notable music. And what's there is all right, it's serviceable, but it's not very memorable, is what it comes down to. Which is rough to me because I find Metroid music, when it is meant to be big and bombastic, that it usually is memorable. The Super Metroid music is memorable. Metroid 1. Fusion 1, there is a melody to the music. I'm thinking particularly of Sector 6 and the Secret Sector and Lower Sector 4's theme. Zero Mission speaks for itself. Prime speaks for itself. In a lot of ways, you can compare this game's major playing sounds to Metroid 2's very abstract bleeps and boops for atmosphere. And there's a place for that, I feel. I think it doesn't really hit the mark here, though. I'm actually glad I caught the missile tank below me, by the way, a few moments ago, because on my test playthrough, I completely forgot that was there. This room sticks out of my memory, too, for one particular reason. It has a very particular enemy encounter in it. With that said, we just need to get to another hologram projector here, and to do that, we need to platform across a lot of morph ball tunnels. Not for nothing. I think this game does a really good job of using the morph ball consistently. Because that is a thing I feel some games have a problem with is, alright, I have this power-up, time to only use it in this area and then never again. Metroid's usually good about placing blocks in certain cases or puzzles that you can use to get... that can use power-ups from later and earlier in the game in some form or manner. Like, usually screw attack blocks can take care of bomb blocks, but bombs are going to be useful throughout the entire thing sort of deal. This game, outside of the morph ball, doesn't really do a good job of that, mostly because a lot of your upgrades... You get every upgrade through the story, of course, because of the very more narrative-driven nature of the game. But sometimes they just only get used in combat encounters, and it's really noticeable, honestly. New special enemy, this is the Grognak. You can only damage it in that obvious glowing light on its stomach. I've always liked this enemy design. With that said, if I recall, this thing was focused on in some regards in the marketing. Because I don't remember much of the marketing for the game, like I brought up back in like part 1 or so, I think. But I think the first time I learned about this game, if it wasn't through Nintendo Power, I think I saw a trailer of it back on the Nintendo channel on the Wii. Which is also where I remember watching the Spirit Tracks trailer time and time again, waiting for that to come out after apparently it wasn't available at my GameStop for like another day after its release or something like that. Also got a really good battle card in Star Force 3 that way. That's something I think the Switch and stuff's doing a good job with, but not as good as the Wii is. There's not things like the Weather Channel or the Nintendo Channel that make the Switch feel like a full experience. It very is just game-focused, and there's some ads, of course, but the Wii felt like a tool for more than gaming in some regards, even though I only ever really used it for that. Like, I think I checked the Weather Channel maybe a collective once to look at it. The Switch is great, but it feels like in some regards it's lacking personality. That was the Grognak. It just fires projectiles at you, sometimes flips itself upside down, making its weakness even more vulnerable. Missiles kill it pretty quickly. And right there, I did a stealthy concentration. That's the thing you really need to learn just by experience in this game, is that you are in control of Samus even when she's off screen more often than not. So you can use a moment when they're showing a cutscene, for instance, to just either move towards a door or do concentration to restore your missiles just to make things work a little more efficiently. You might be noticing we're leaving a lot of items behind. More often than not, that's because I just can't get them yet because I'm missing certain key abilities that are needed for it. The one in that last room even, I believe it's an energy part. You can see it on screen, and you can mark it on your map, like I mentioned back in part 2, just by zooming in on it with your first-person mode. No real point in doing that, though, because in a lot of rooms that you can zoom in on things, you'll just kill every enemy in there usually anyway, and it'll get marked through that method. That missile tank took me a while to find my first run. Not many times the game just does the, hey, look up. sort of deal that is common in a lot of games nowadays, I feel. Like, usually the solution to a puzzle in, say, like, God of War 2018 is look up at this specific angle and then throw your axe at it. Not many instances of that in this game. Usually the puzzle solutions are, I don't want to say a little more obvious, but definitely a little more easily pointed out. With that said, this is definitely a part of the game that I don't want to say I hold it close to my heart, although I do like this particular morph ball launcher. Because I just like the visual of Samus busting through an elevator like that. One of the next rooms in particular is one that I particularly remember playing through as a younger kid. And just, the main reason it stuck with me is for a very silly reason. Like I mentioned, I think in an earlier part, when this game came out, my computer was in a different spot. It was still my brother's room, I think, at that point, because the Wii used to be my brother's room, because he had moved out at the time, and now that's my room. I was watching a lot of anime on YouTube at the time, in particular, in the old, sometimes desynced audio, 10-minute long parts, sometimes 8-minute long parts, so they could have a better split of 3 parts versus 2 10 minutes and then a 2-minute or something like that. I used to do a lot of that back when. I watched a lot of Mega Man Anti-Warrior Access. After the fact on that, I watched some other scattered stuff. But the main one I'm thinking of here is Katekyo Hitman Reborn. I love that manga. I don't think it ends the best, but I have a lot of fond memories of it. And I distinctly remember watching through it on YouTube back in 2010 when I was playing this game, in this room in particular. I believe it was either the arc where the other potential successor came in and tried to take Suna's shit, or it was the start of the future arc. I don't remember. It was 12 years ago. But I always distinctly remember because I remember hearing one of the openings while fighting this particular Grognak. Yeah, we're already fighting another one of them. This game does a good job of having a lot of enemy variety for a game where the combat is as, I don't want to say simple as it is, but as straightforward. And that's partially compacted because there's some enemy types you only fight 2 or 3 times. So they're like, all right, we'll have like 6 enemies like that. Sometimes they serve more of a purpose, other times they don't. Also, again, sometimes you see my first-person mode going a little wonky with the direction I'm facing. That's entirely because I have to stand up in order to actively use first-person in any effective method, and that led to some awkward camera angles. This particular Grognak, you can get some pretty good upper ground strategies going on, especially with the latter half where it's weak points on top, because you can stand on this hill. It's just a method of the block on wanting to register or not, and sometimes the missiles are a little awkward in that the missiles in this game somewhat home, but not entirely. They generally travel in a pretty straight line, so if there's something like a neck in the way of the weak points, the neck will hit the missile instead, and you won't get damage done because of that. It's a little annoying, but missiles aren't a finite resource in this game, so it's not a big deal, I feel. That said, I do wish that this game had more control options. Like, the reason that apparently that it's mostly just the Wiimotes is they wanted to keep it simple. And I can applaud the idea of that. That's part of why Mario Wii worked so well in a lot of regards. But I feel that with some games you need more complex control schemes so you can do more things quickly. I feel this game needed to be Wiimote and Nunchuck. Like, say you hold the Z button on the Wiimote to enter first person, and then, let's say B fires missiles, A does the usual shot, C could be your morph ball button, Nunchuck could be dodge while in first person, and then obviously the Nunchuck's analog stick would be movement, which would feel a lot better because Samus controls tightly in terms of her actual movement speed. Her momentum's real nice. But since you're locked into the 8 main directions, sometimes smoothly maneuvering between things can be a little rough. Not that the game really requires you to be super precise with movement like that, I'd say the most precise it gets is with certain mobility-based puzzles later on with one particular ability, but even then, that ability is relatively forgiving. Either way, despite the Grognak being dead, the door has not yet unlocked. We do need to go get a terminal to unlock it. Thankfully, there's also an energy tank along the way. So, hey, I'll take the extra health. They do a decent enough job of giving you, I feel, notable E-tanks along the way, so you can just have more health. Because enemies do more damage the further you get in, as the game's difficulty curve should work. They are very much, in a way, sort of like the blue orbs from Devil May Cry, in that they place some more obviously along the way, just so you have a, not a easier time, but a more comfortable time. Either way, with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 6, I think, numbering's a little weird at the moment for reasons I'll go into later, we're going to go check out the Biosphere Research Center that Adam told us to go look at. See you guys then.